Tessa Brooks approached the yacht harbor with a quiet determination, her worn shoes scuffing softly against the cobblestone path. Her thrift store dress, modest and faded, fluttered slightly in the ocean breeze. She carried a simple tote bag, nothing ornate or branded, and her face was bare of makeup. The sharp contrast between her humble attire and the ultra-luxurious setting made her pause for a moment just outside the gleaming iron gates. Beyond, sleek yachts shimmered under the morning sun, their polished wood and chrome gleaming like jewels set against the ripple of the sea. The salty breeze carried a mix of scents, expensive cologne, freshly varnished decks, and the faintest trace of seaweed. The gentle hum of creaking rigging and the quiet chatter of impeccably dressed guests drifted over the water. Men in tailored blazers and women in silk dresses floated past on the wooden docks, sipping sparkling wine, their laughter light and sharp like crystal. Tessa's heart beat in her chest, equal parts nervous and resolute. She stepped forward, eyes sweeping over the opulence, quietly taking in each shining detail. A few nearby onlookers cast sideways glances, lips curling in derision. Murmurs spread like ripples, words too low to fully catch, but heavy with scorn. One sharply dressed man nodded to his companion, whispering, "Look at her shoes. She must be lost." A woman in pearl earrings smirked, "That's definitely not a member. Probably staff or worse." Their laughter, a little too loud, drew eyes from others. The atmosphere shifted as exclusion closed in around Tessa like a cold fog. At the gate, the club's gatekeeper, a stern woman with a crisp blazer and a clipboard, noticed Tessa immediately. Her gaze swept over the worn shoes, the tote bag, the simple posture. Beneath polite professionalism, suspicion and judgment gleamed sharp and unyielding. The gatekeeper stepped forward, her heels clicking sharply against the stone as she closed the distance between herself and Tessa. She held the clipboard like a shield, her eyes narrowing slightly as she spoke, voice calm but carrying an unmistakable edge. "Can I help you? Are you sure you have clearance to be here?" Her tone suggested she already knew the answer but wanted to hear it from Tessa herself. Tessa met the cold gaze steadily. "I'm here to see the harbor ceremony and to meet Admiral Graham," she said quietly, her voice steady despite the tightening knot in her stomach. The gatekeeper's lips curved into a thin, disbelieving smile. "The harbor ceremony is a private event reserved strictly for yacht club members and their guests," she replied loudly enough for nearby patrons to catch every word. Her eyes flicked disdainfully over Tessa's thrifted dress, unbranded tote, and scuffed shoes. "Unless you have a membership card or an invitation, I'm afraid you can't enter." Tessa's throat tightened. She had expected resistance, but the bluntness and public manner of the dismissal caught her off guard. Around them, murmurs erupted as several patrons overheard the exchange. A well-dressed man leaned over to his companion and snickered, "See? Told you she was just some stray looking for handouts." A woman with perfectly coiffed hair and pearly white teeth added with a sneer, "Probably thinks she can just sneak in here like she belongs. This isn't a place for people like her." Tessa's cheeks flushed with heat, but she squared her shoulders and refused to look away. She glanced briefly at the crowd and realized several guests had pulled out their phones, some already recording, others whispering viciously. The atmosphere grew heavier, more hostile. The gatekeeper's tone grew sharper. "I said you are not allowed inside. Please leave now." She gestured toward the exit, the slight lift of her chin clearly signaling that anyone remaining would be considered a trespasser. For a brief moment, Tessa was frozen, the humiliation pressing down hard. She swallowed, trying to stay calm in the rising storm of whispered insults and pointed stares. Her hands clenched, curled under the weight of her bag. She had come expecting an event, a celebration of passion for the sea, but instead found herself under the harsh spotlight of exclusion. Her voice faltered before she regained composure. I just want to attend the ceremony. I've contributed to the community's sailing initiative. She hoped to appeal to reason, but her words seemed to fall on deaf ears. The gatekeeper shook her head, expression unyielding. Community initiatives don't grant access here. We have rules. You must leave. A security guard suddenly appeared beside the gatekeeper, imposing and silent, watching Tessa with skeptical eyes. The guard stepped forward as if waiting for a signal. Tessa met the guard's gaze, her own flickering with quiet defiance underneath the rising tide of embarrassment. She could feel every stare, every whispered insult like knives piercing her resolve. The laughter came in waves, cruel and unrelenting now. One of the guests near the gate laughed loudly. Look at the way she's trembling, probably scared she'll be made to walk the plank. Another guffawed, she'd be better off scrubbing decks, not parading around here pretending. The crowd's reaction intensified. Some cheered the gatekeeper's decision, while others simply watched with disdainful curiosity. Tessa's hands trembled slightly as she looked around, searching for an ally, a friendly face, but found none. The isolation pressed in on her like freezing water. Please, she said softly, wanting more than anything to just blend into the background and not be the center of this cruel spectacle. I just want to attend the ceremony. But it was clear nobody cared to hear her. The gatekeeper motioned sharply. Security will escort you out if you don't leave immediately. The guard reached out and gently but firmly grasped her arm. Tessa gasped at the touch, the sudden contact breaking something inside her. She wanted to resist but knew it would only fuel more ridicule. As the guard led her away from the gates, the crowd parted to let her pass, some sneering openly, others sneaking quick glances with a mixture of curiosity and contempt. Phones recorded every step she took, immortalizing the moment for online ridicule. The salty breeze felt colder as she moved farther from the harbor's entrance. She dared a quick look back over her shoulder at the crowd, her eyes meeting the gatekeeper's for a fleeting second. The woman's expression was unreadable, professional yet filled with quiet triumph. Tessa's chest tightened. The taste of humiliation burned on her tongue. Her cheeks flushed, not just with embarrassment but with the sting of exclusion, a harsh reminder that some doors remained closed, no matter how much you longed to pass through. Outside the iron gates, she stopped for a moment, the sounds of the yacht club fading behind her. She clutched her bag tighter, steadying herself as a rush of emotion threatened to spill out. Anger, sadness, and something fierce and fragile simmered beneath her calm exterior. No one had come to her aid. No hand had reached out from the crowd to offer support or encouragement. The cold reality of solitude wrapped around her like a heavy cloak. Slowly, she drew a deep breath, pressing her lips together to silence the tremor in her voice. She turned away from the glittering harbor, focusing on the promise she had made to herself and the community she represented. This wasn't the end, it was only the beginning. Back inside the security office, the gatekeeper, Marianne, leaned back in her chair, a smirk tugging at the corner of her lips as she recounted the incident to her colleague, a burly man named Simon. The fluorescent lights overhead flickered faintly, bathing the sparse room in a sterile glow. Marianne held her clipboard like a trophy. She had no business being here, Marianne said with quiet satisfaction. This place is exclusive for a reason. If we start letting anyone in, it tarnishes the club's reputation. We have an image to protect. Simon nodded, impressed by her decisiveness. You handled it perfectly, he said. No nonsense. Marianne gave a smug smile. Absolutely. She was an imposter, trying to sneak in and take advantage. We can't have that. We guard the gates for the club's honor. With that, Marianne pushed herself up from the chair, smoothing the creases of her blazer. She glanced at the clock, noting the minutes until the harbor ceremony resumed. The heavy laughter outside had already started again, guests returning to their carefree conversations, glasses clinking in the warm morning sun. The momentary disruption was forgotten. Outside the gates, the yacht club's atmosphere had settled back into its polished rhythm. The clinking of fine china and the hum of conversation resumed. Well-dressed men shared private jokes while elegant women adjusted delicate necklaces, their smiles effortless and practiced. The sunlight danced across the water, and the masts of yachts swayed gently, tethered to the docks like sentinels of old wealth. Meanwhile, Tessa sat quietly on a weathered wooden bench a few yards away from the iron gates, her back to the harbor. She pulled her thin jacket tightly around her, the ocean breeze tugging at her sleeves. She stared at a knot in the wood beneath her fingertips, trying to steady the rapid beating of her heart. The sting of humiliation had given way to a mixture of anger and weariness. Her lips pressed into a thin line, and she swallowed hard, wiping her damp palms on her skirt. She lifted her gaze to the harbor one more time, watching the crowds gather near the pavilion where Admiral Graham would soon speak. Somewhere deeper within her, a faint resolve began to take root, slow and steady. She wasn't going to disappear without a fight, not after all the work poured into the community sailing program she had helped create. Her glance was interrupted suddenly by the low rumble of an approaching engine. A sleek black limousine pulled smoothly up the narrow dock road, shining in the sunlight like a polished jewel. An impeccably dressed assistant stepped out, clutching a pristine white envelope with gold embossing. The assistant's eyes scanned the crowd briefly before locking on Tessa's figure. Without hesitation, she made a purposeful stride toward the bench. The murmurs began instantly as guests noticed. "Who is that? Look at the car, she must be someone important." The atmosphere shifted, delicate whispers turning to curious stares. The simmering tension from before returned, only now underscored with an air of uncertainty. Near the gate, Marianne caught sight of the assistant and stiffened. Her confident demeanor faltered as the assistant approached Tessa without hesitation, handing over the envelope with an almost reverent nod. "Miss Brooks? Admiral Graham requested you be brought here immediately." Marianne's lips pressed into a tight line, stepping forward with an outstretched hand. "Excuse me, this is private property. You can't just allow her access." Her voice was sharp but tinged with unease. Before Marianne could continue, a commanding voice echoed from the dock. The guests turned, some shifting uneasily as Admiral James Graham himself strode briskly toward Tessa. His dark navy uniform bore polished brass buttons and Admiral's insignia gleamed on his shoulders. His face was weathered but sharp, eyes reflecting a mixture of kindness and authority. "Let her through, Marianne," Admiral Graham said firmly. "She is an honored guest today." His voice carried clearly across the crowd, silencing whispers instantly. People stopped mid-conversation, their attention drawn as if by a magnetic force. The gatekeeper's face paled as the Admiral's words undercut her command. She stepped back, kudos for her earlier efforts now seeming brittle and insignificant in the shadow of official authority. Tessa stood slowly, the envelope still in her hand feeling like a lifeline. Her breath caught briefly, then evened out as she rose to follow the Admiral toward the pavilion. The crowd parted unconsciously, eyes wide with astonishment. As they moved, the guests began speculating quietly, voices hushed but filled with incredulity. "Who is this woman? I didn't realize she was that important. Why didn't anyone tell us she was attending?" The social balance of the event shifted, fragile as fragile could be. The gatekeeper lingered at the edge of the crowd, watching as the Admiral and Tessa walked past. The spark of pride she had felt earlier dissolved into something colder, awkwardness, doubt, and an unspoken apology. Yet she said nothing, swallowing her pride as the reality of the moment settled in. At the pavilion, the crowd gathered in expectant silence as Admiral Graham stepped onto the podium, signaling for the ceremony to continue. He gestured elegantly to Tessa. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, voice resonant over the harbor, "it gives me great honor to introduce our keynote speaker and sponsor for this year's community sailing program, Miss Tessa Brooks." Murmurs rippled through the crowd like waves. Phones were raised, and the gatekeeper's earlier disdain began to look like foolishness in the face of official recognition. The guests' faces shifted visibly, admiration, surprise, and slight embarrassment washing over them. Tessa's own expression remained composed, almost serene as she stepped forward, the weight of years of hard work distilled into this singular moment. She offered a gracious nod to the Admiral, then turned toward the audience, ready to share her vision for making the sea accessible to all. The yacht club, once a fortress of exclusion, had become the stage for something entirely different. And everyone present knew it. The cluster of guests fell into a hush as Tessa Brooks stepped away from Admiral Graham and onto the polished wooden platform of the pavilion. A deep, expectant silence wrapped around the harbor, refracting the sunlight like a magnifying glass on the sudden, dazzling truth now unfolding before them. The very air seemed charged with disbelief, tension rippling through the crowd as if the glossy surface of their exclusive world had been suddenly cracked. Admiral Graham's voice rang clear, steady, and commanding. "Miss Brooks is not only the keynote speaker today but also the principal sponsor of the Community Sailing Initiative, a program dedicated to opening the doors of sailing and maritime education to young people from all walks of life, regardless of their background or means." A soft murmur swept through the guests, some lowering their phones in stunned silence, others whispering quick exchanges like winded spectators at an unexpected scene. The well-coiffed woman who had whispered derisively earlier tucked her own phone hurriedly into her clutch. A middle-aged gentleman in a tailored navy blazer blinked rapidly, processing his earlier judgments dissolving in the face of fact. Among the crowd, the gatekeeper Marianne's mouth twisted in disbelief. Her posture stiffened, her usual self-assured demeanor crumbling as she stared at Tessa. The years she had spent enforcing exclusion had never brought her to this moment utterly undone. Her eyes, once sharp and alight with suspicion, now flickered with regret and the faintest edge of shame. Tessa accepted Admiral Graham's introduction with a calm nod, stepping fully into the spotlight. Her eyes scanned the crowd just briefly, taking in the faces that had earlier scoffed at her without contempt or anger but with an almost quiet strength that surprised those who had doubted her. Adjusting the simple sleeves of her faded thrifted dress, a deliberate choice her voice would explain shortly, she cleared her throat and spoke, her tone soft but carried on the breeze like a steady sail. "Thank you, Admiral Graham, and everyone here today. I want to share why I chose to come dressed plainly." She paused, the raw honesty in her gaze drawing the audience in without needing embellishment. "It is because this work, the Community Sailing Initiative, is about more than appearances or status. It's about access, opportunity, and the freedom the sea offers to everyone, no matter where they come from." The crowd listened, spellbound, as she continued, "I traveled here directly from a week-long workshop I led for children in underserved neighborhoods. Many of those children have never touched a sailboat, never seen beyond the harbor's edge. What I wear does not define me, just as the clothes a young sailor wears shouldn't limit their dreams." Guests exchanged glances, their faces softening. Whispers rose quietly. "So she's the one behind the program," said a woman in a tasteful blazer, her voice subdued, respectful. A polished man added, "I never expected such humility with such impact." Tessa's composed elegance amidst the plush setting underscored her words in a way no grand gesture could. There was no gloating, no bitterness, only conviction and grace. She embodied a vision far broader and deeper than the yacht club's polished veneers could contain. The lightly salted breeze picked up, carrying her words out over the water where sailing vessels rocked gently in the dock. The juxtaposition was stark, old wealth and tradition standing beside the promise of change and inclusion. Mary Ann, the gatekeeper, felt the weight of quiet judgment close in from all sides. Colleagues nearby shot her uncertain looks. An elderly gentleman, renowned for his outspoken views, approached her and muttered, "That was uncalled for. We misjudged her." Mary Ann's eyes flickered with unease, but she remained silent. Among the guests who had earlier mocked Tessa, embarrassment quickly spiraled into awkward apologies. A slender woman, whose laughter had sparked some of the sharpest whispers, approached Tessa hesitantly, shifting uneasily on her feet. "Miss Brooks, I apologize for my earlier comments. I didn't know." Her voice trailed off, eyes downcast. Tessa smiled gently, her voice warm but restrained. "Thank you. It means a lot." There was no sharpness, only an offer of graceful closure that left the woman nodding in relief. Another group exchanged sheepish glances as they averted their eyes, their attitudes quietly altered. Yet, despite the reactions around her, Tessa kept her focus on the celebration ahead. She lifted her chin slightly and began sharing details about the program, how it offered sailing lessons, scholarships, and mentorships to youth from diverse backgrounds. She spoke of grit and dreams, the sea as a teacher, and community as a foundation. Her words wove images of hope and possibility, shining through the club's gilded walls like sunlight filtering into a shadowed room. More than the rich surroundings, it was her vision that captured attention now. As she spoke, the Admiral watched her with proud eyes, the warmth on his face contrasting the more reserved crowd. He knew the quiet battles she had fought to bring this program to life, the countless days spent fundraising and navigating bureaucracy. This moment of public acknowledgement was more than deserved, it was overdue. When Tessa concluded, a warm round of applause swelled through the guests, genuine and heartfelt. Guests rose from their seats, some standing on tiptoe to catch a better view, their earlier snobbery replaced by something closer to admiration. Mary Ann, standing at the edge of the gathering, watched the crowd shift almost imperceptibly. The very harbor, the emblem of exclusivity she had defended so fiercely, now hummed with a new tension, anticipation of change. For Tessa, the moment was bittersweet, a victory born of quiet endurance, a testament not to the clothes she wore or the status assigned at a club entrance, but to the strength of her purpose. As the crowd dispersed into conversations colored with new respect and curiosity, the yacht club had already begun to transform, all because a single woman had stood her ground and shown them what she truly represented. Admiral Graham's gaze cut through the lingering murmurs as he stepped down from the pavilion with determined purpose. His voice rose, firm and unmistakable. "I must address an unfortunate incident that took place earlier at the gate." The crowd fell silent again, eyes fixing on him with sudden seriousness. "Our club is founded on a legacy of excellence, yes, but also on values of respect, inclusivity, and openness to positive growth." He paused, scanning the faces around him before continuing. "Behavior that undermines these core principles cannot be tolerated." Mary Ann, the gatekeeper who turned away Miss Brooks without cause, will be standing down from her duties immediately pending retraining. This is a necessary step to ensure our standards reflect our values. An audible gasp wove through the crowd. Heads turned, whispers erupted about the rare public reprimand. Mary Ann's face flushed deeply, confusion mingling with shock. The weight of the Admiral's words was undeniable, and the club's elite spectators shifted uncomfortably, tracing the gravity of the moment. Mary Ann lowered her gaze, shoulders sagging. Wordlessly, she removed her security badge and handed it to a nearby supervisor who approached quickly at the Admiral's nod. The finality in the air was stark, her authority evaporated in the face of organizational justice. A wave of sympathetic stares swept the crowd toward Tessa, whose calm composure remained intact. Guests who had moments earlier dismissed or mocked her now regarded her with renewed deference. Fingers pointed discreetly at the gatekeeper's retreating form while conversation sparked. She didn't realize how serious this would be. It's about time the club opened its doors wider. Imagine the nightmare of being caught on a video like that. The reinvigorated atmosphere brimmed with a sense of correction and renewal. The yacht club that once prided itself on an unwelcome exclusiveness now buzzed with whispered promises of inclusivity. Later that afternoon, the club's corridors and lounges were abuzz with reactions. Some guests expressed relief at the club's visible response, others lamented the disruption to tradition. Over clinking glasses and quiet clusters, the story of Tessa's arrival and the gatekeeper's dismissal traveled swiftly, growing in detail and impact. Meanwhile, Marianne found herself in a quiet break room, the hum of the club receding outside. Her reflection in the mirror was unfamiliar, eyes fragile, lips pressed tight. The pride in her professionalism now bitterly tainted by embarrassment and regret. She ran her fingers through her hair, exhaling slowly. Moments later, a soft knock interrupted the silence. A younger staff member entered hesitantly. "Marianne, I just wanted to say, I understand why you acted as you did, but maybe there's more to learn. Maybe this is an opportunity. I hope things get better for you." Marianne managed a weary nod, the tension between shame and acceptance prickling under her skin. As heat faded from the day, the harbor glistened in the descending sun, and guests lingered at tables, animatedly discussing the shift they had witnessed. The story had spread beyond the confines of the yacht club, reaching social networks and news outlets, sparking conversations about access, privilege, and the power of respectful inclusion. In the evening, as stars began to pepper the sky, Tessa walked quietly along the dock, the soft wooden boards creaking beneath her thoughtful steps. The gentle lap of waves against the hulls created a soothing rhythm. The cool breeze tugged gently at her hair and the edge of her plain dress. She stopped near the entryway, watching guests depart in scattered clusters, their chatter fading into the night. Eyes followed her as she moved with measured grace, an undeniable presence that no one could ignore. From a distance, Marianne approached slowly, hesitant footsteps carrying her toward the woman whose dignity had humbled her. The tension between them was almost tangible, a silent acknowledgement of the day's upheaval. Marianne's voice was low, uncertain. "Miss Brooks, I'm sorry. I was wrong. I judged you too quickly." Her gaze flickered downward, shame evident. Tessa offered a brief, genuine smile, the kind that carried both solace and quiet strength. "Thank you, Marianne. That means more than you know." She reached out briefly, placing a light hand on Marianne's arm, a gesture of grace and forgiveness, but also of unspoken resolve. The encounter was brief, but it lingered in the air, the possibility of understanding and change beginning to take root where prejudice had once stood. As Tessa continued walking, tall and composed beneath the moonlight, the yacht club behind her seemed different, no longer a fortress of untouchable elites but a place slowly reshaped by her courage and vision. The echoes of the day's events trailed in the quiet night air. The guests, the gatekeeper, the admiral, and most of all, Tessa herself, all part of a story unfolding like a tide, reshaping the harbor and those who gathered there. A new chapter had begun.